Well, I suppose I'm to talk, is that correct? Well, I've been threatened with waterboarding if I don't speak. It forms of punishment if I rock. Okay, let's go. My name is Roy Keenan. I'm the grandson of Roy Keenan and the son of Roy Keenan. Well, I started off being born in a hospital for unwed mothers. My grandfather was a railroad executive, and he had a friend who was a doctor for the railroads, and he had a room assigned to him in this particular hospital. So that's how I started out, a near bastard. It was during 1933, during the Depression, and of course nobody had any money, or at least most of the people we knew, except my grandparents. My paternal grandfather, he got a high school education, which was not too common then. No, it wasn't. Neither of my parents had a high school education. He would steal books out of the railroad and study engineering. He became a civil engineer with the New York Central. So he was pretty successful, and we lived in a house that he had bought, which had 2 flats. And so we essentially were kept by him in a way during the Depression. My dad tried to get every job he could. Oh, I remember one occasion we had a goat, and this goat we loved to butt it. We had a football helmet that my dad had, and we would butt the goat, and it was a lot of fun. And my grandfather came out, and my grandfather would wear a suit and a tie when he worked in the garden, and he had these suits custom made, and he was pretty stuffy in a way, except I was really fond of my grandfather. And he was out there, and this goat knocked him on his ass. As he left, he said, "I'm going to bring a revolver out next time. If that goat's here, I'm going to kill him." And so I think we got rid of the goat. So that was kind of funny. And my grandmother, it was a very funny relationship with my grandmother because she always liked me. She would give me money and ignore the other children. I felt it was very unfair. My dad had always wanted to be a farmer, and he worked for the electric company, got enough money to get this pretty disastrous little farm. And we grew up on a farm with ponies and all that stuff. Very interesting childhood. I understand that I was difficult, that I think my mother exaggerates this. And that I caused a lot of trouble in school. I was transferred immediately to the black classroom. My mother raised hell, of course, but it was because of my behavior, not because I couldn't read or write. And essentially I had no education. I mean, everybody of any value was working in the war industry or quit, and they had a succession of terrible teachers. And of course, I read continually. I was what we called an autodidact. I was taught myself, but I left huge gaps in my education, like math. But I was pretty bright, so it helped a lot. Well, I was in a class of 26. There was athletics, but I was never any good at it. I always played everything. But the main thing I did was work. I was a hard working person because, you need money and you want to get by and everything. And not that my parents were selfish, because they weren't. They just didn't have it. And so I would get up in the morning and walk up to the major route, which was like a mile, and I would hitchhike. In those days, you hitchhike. And every time somebody'd pick you up. So I'd be up there at 6 o'clock in the morning hitchhiking, and I'd get a ride down into an area called Indian Hills, where the Tafts and the rich people in Cincinnati lived. And I would just knock on doors till you found somebody to hire you. I was in the 4-H and all that rural stuff, and so I would get up every morning and milk cows. I worked like hell. I mean, I worked damn hard. And, and I had pigs and did all of that stuff. And then you would hire out, somebody was cutting hay and baling it. Well, you'd hire out. And I was always like a little refugee kid. I was so damn skinny. I didn't look like that anybody had ever fed me. And that's changed in recent years. One thing I remember about my childhood was the VJ Day. Everybody was drunk, and there was a fair going on, and my father and his friends were all passed out under a peach tree in the yard. And made kind of an interesting view, trying to get into the fair. And so they kept being thrown out by a guard that probably wasn't any more sober than they were. But it was a long damn war, and we all had some relatives in that thing. So that was a big, big relief. I can remember I had a new pair of shoes, and I strapped them over my shoulder with a string, and one of them fell off, and it went down the creek. Now, my parents, I thought they would raise hell about it, but they didn't. But I had to go to special issue stamp to buy another pair of shoes because shoes were rationed. And the food, we were just scraping along. And my mother worked for a while in a defense plant, and my father left the electric company to work in a defense plant where they made a lot more money. I think he's invented some little thing on a machine. I remember that, and he got a little money for that. But they just didn't make a good income. And my mother was a big reader. She would read a book or so a day, if she wasn't worn out. She wrote, too, and she used to enter these contests. Now, she never won a big one, but she won a lot of little ones because she could write. My mother was smart. And the other thing I remember about growing up was I never recall my mother ever saying she loved me. And I'm very struck by this when you see these women going out to the restaurant, I love you. And the point was, why would you ever question it? It never occurred to us to question this. Your mother not loving you? Why did she put up with all that and sacrifice herself? It's a ridiculous statement. In my opinion, I'm always offended by it. But I guess it put me down as someone who hates love. So I grew up in that kind of atmosphere. It was a very happy childhood. It just, Well, the other brothers were later. Dan, he was the one that was a year younger than I was. But I just never, we played together, all that stuff, but it was just never, ever were as close as you would think. And the other brothers I was closer to in a way, but I was away at school and stuff. So, but I still visit them. And my sister we were quite close to, and we still love my sister. She's terrific. That was the main thing in our lives. We lived out. Not that far out, but we saw people. Now, I never was very friendly with people. In other words, I had some friends, but my younger brother, everybody was, his friend. He knew everybody. And I knew them, but I just was much more of a loner than he was. And he never had the work urge that I had, Anytime I wasn't working, I was feeling bad because there was always something that you could work at. Our family, we always had aunts and cousins and the whole bit. There wasn't any of this animosity. I suppose there were little incidents, but, nothing. Everybody seemed to get along. Good childhood. Well, obviously I went to college. I had a small scholarship. And you see, because I wasn't educated, I didn't know anything about how you went to college. And I didn't want to go to Cincinnati, and Ohio State was up the road, and Ohio State was an interesting place when I went there. I lived in the stadium, very large rooms, and I think we had like 30 people in each room. It's like an army barracks, basically. There just wasn't any housing. This was the GI Bill for a lot of people. Enrollment increased enormously, and they had not built anything during the whole war. Oh yeah, we knew a lot of people that had been in the war. I can remember one night I was talking to this guy, and we were complaining about this professor's giving us a terrible assignment. And this guy is talking, and he says, what are we talking about? Do you know, I don't know, a year or so ago, a few years back, I was marching through the snow with Nazis guarding us on both sides. And, drop out or get shot any minute. And here I am complaining about this stupid professor's assignment. It just shows, how crazy things get. But an awful lot of displaced persons, I don't know if they were Jewish, or I guess they were, some of them, but they were from all different countries, from the Ukraine and Poland, and people who had been driven into Germany, used in camps and things, and then at the end of the war, they didn't know what to do with them. They let them out. Some of them were quite bright, and we knew a lot of people like that. They were all over the place. And I was enrolled in agriculture because I thought I was going to do dairy science. But then I found out at one point they didn't give any chemistry courses. Well, I'd been playing with chemicals since I was a little tiny kid and reading chemical things. And I had my own laboratories, and they didn't make anything. I always tried to make explosives. But anyway, when
Did you ever blow anything up?
oh yeah, not anything serious, but I lost a lot of hair on my hands and eyebrows and stuff. But anyway, when I found out there wasn't any chemistry, I said, this is ridiculous. I want to take chemistry courses. So I was a chemistry major, and that's what I always wanted to do anyway. I didn't realize it. And then I was in ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps. You see, you had to be in ROTC in a state school. You had to take the first 2 years, but I wanted to take the last 2 years to stay out of the damn Korean War. You can imagine all these people acting like soldiers, and they really had not that much of a hold over you anyway. It was a mess. We weren't capable of doing anything. All we did was line up and sort of march, and then took studies. I was in the chemical corps to deal with chemical gases and germ warfare and that kind of stuff. When I graduated from college, we had our uniforms on. You stripped the cap and gown, and then they swore you in as an officer in the United States Army. They had programs where you could delay going into the Army. I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, so I just wrote letters every, 6 months or so. The Army is interested in more educated people, and so that I'm continuing my education and on, and they just left you alone. So they left me alone while I got my graduate degree, and I worked in, DNA was just coming out. It's amazing how things advanced. And at that time, a person like me could practically know something about the whole field of biochemistry. I got my degree and I went into the Army. At that time, there was no war on, and they had a glut of officers. So you had the option of just going in for 6 months. So I went to Anniston, Alabama, and prevented the communist takeover of Anniston, Alabama, and then got out and went for a postdoctoral fellowship in the University of Wisconsin, which is really a great place. Oh yeah, I had married and had a couple kids before I got out of graduate school. Well, I met her at a dance. I thought she was just the neatest thing I ever saw, and I don't know what she saw in me. I mean, I wasn't real pretty or anything, and she was interested in me, and so we got together and got married. And she had an identical twin, so I had my choice of two of them, but the other one did. The other one was more sensible. She wouldn't associate with me that much. But your mother was one I liked, and I told you how I was interested in her, and later on she lost all interest in me. But another thing, I have no musical abilities. I mean, I try not to sing the national anthem so people won't hate the country. And your mother had, maybe less musical ability, but we both liked music. I loved music. I used to go off by myself, when I was in high school and things, to see plays and operas and stuff, and nobody did that. And so I developed this love of music. I got her interested in classical music. I've never cared much for any other kind. She sort of liked this country western stuff, and but she became a great convert when she heard the recordings I had of La Boheme, and it's just gorgeous stuff. And we've gone to operas all our lives, tried to whenever we could. I did a postdoc at the University of Wisconsin, and we did things a little different. Like I would rent a major mansion, and then we'd rent out rooms, and we lived in a mansion, curving staircases and huge dining rooms, and they had a carriage house which was damn near as large as my present home. And Janine would clean these rooms and work. She was always a worker. She was always a pain in the ass, about doing arty things and stuff. But she was always a worker. Yeah, well, I was in the Army. I got a reasonable salary. And then as a postdoctoral fellow, you got a salary. Because in those days, there was more government money for research. And, you told them you were doing something that was going to save the world and everything. And, we were doing real research. And I used to work all the time, 6 days a week and nights. And, it wasn't messing around. after I left Wisconsin, I became an instructor at Tufts University. They had a medical school in the center of Boston. But I met so many interesting people there, just really interesting people, especially these old Jews that had been driven out of Europe, scientists. And I knew this old guy that befriended me, a little old guy, Richard Wagner, like the composer. But he was a little old guy, and he I don't know why, but he liked me. A couple people liked me and talked to me all the time. And he would come in and talk to me, wore a little beret and quite a character. And then the man that I worked for directly or with, a German professor, Gerhard Schmidt, and he was quite famous as a biochemist and quite famous as an eccentric. I mean, somebody told me he didn't leave because of Hitler. He went on vacation and they wouldn't let him back in because he wouldn't know what's going on. He played his cello and did his science, and we went to a meeting one time, and people were wearing these Johnson presidential stickers, and he said, I wondered for a long time why everybody was named Johnson. I mean, this guy was really out of it. But he was a delightful man. We used to go, and he'd drag me out to have beer in the afternoon, and, I did a lot of stuff there. And you see, they were just building the medical school, so I was the first bunch to get in, one to get in, and I was lucky to get in here because we didn't have money up there. They didn't, they got contributions and stuff, but Texas had money, and they still do, except they've squandered a lot of it. But we got labs and technicians paid for and equipment and all kinds of things. And I like the living down here except for the heat. And, it's a lot of rednecks and stuff. It doesn't make you too happy. And, I always made a living at it. And because we saved, we never spent money. And so that was a big item, not spending. For instance, right now I'm almost 82, and I had my first car at when I was 22, maybe, something like that. I spent a total of like $30,000 on cars, net. So they always ran and they always stopped, and that was all I cared about. AC. Oh, for a while we didn't have AC because I was trying to save money. We built a house, but we finally got air conditioning. And I was trying to get by. I didn't like to borrow money or anything. And, I was a child of the Depression. And you remember that you don't always have money. But anyway, we got great kids, except for one who can't operate a camera. No, we've been very, very fortunate in our family. We've got just tremendous kids, and they married well, and they've got grandchildren, which are very nice people. We're really pleased with our family life. Been enormously lucky, and of course, I think wasn't anything to do with me because I wasn't always home all the time. It's your grandmother that really ran the show. I used to have an answering service, and it said, "This is Janine Keenan's home. This is her humble servant, Roy." And I just worked here, you know what I mean? Did what she said, and if I did it quick enough, I didn't get in any trouble. But she raised the kids, very determined woman. And she was always looking into philosophies and religions and all that kind of stuff. And, she was really a nutcase. And, weird stuff. And I, of course, never had any religion except Parkism. I've told you about my religion, haven't I? Okay. What? About there are two major problems in the United States, organized religion and parking. And I would solve this problem by leveling the churches and making parking lots. But anyway, she's always been in a Buddhist or bead shaking or whatever the weird people do. And it's kind of interesting, the two types of us living together, because I'm an enormously practical, non-spiritual person, and she's the opposite. And it somehow rubbed off on both of us a little bit. I've made her a little more sensible sometimes, and I can't say the spiritual aspect rubbed off onto me, but certainly concern for other people and stuff like that. And we built a couple. What are you doing, banging up there? We built a couple homes, and I just, I didn't have a hell of a lot to do with either one of them. If there was a rock that needed lifting, I would lift it. And I never wanted to live in the city, and she never wanted to live in the city. She said that was one of the first things that interested her about me was I said I wanted to live out in the country. I just never been comfortable with the city. And, if you can't piss off your own front porch, you shouldn't live there. We always lived out. And of course, the children of this marriage did not like it at all out in the country. The other thing I want to mention before I get very far is something my wife wouldn't mention. She never mentioned me in a whole damned interview. Now, she is the center of my life and the thing that keeps me going and really it's just the most important thing in the world to me. And to me, when I saw her interview, I married this guy and let's get on with the rest of the story. And so she's taken a slight interest in me, but she's basically in favor of saving humanity and all of her friends. You know what I mean? They all call up. She got an ad in the paper, Yellow Pages, I think. Troubled, divorced, unhappy, call Janine any hour, day or night. And so, I don't fit in that pattern. I'm not in there, so I can't really actually get any attention. I'll come up and... Excuse me, I'm on the phone. My friend has a hangnail. And so that's the way it's going to end up, But she's got friends. Everybody loves her. She's a wonderful human being. And I've got a, tiny fragment of her affection and attention. And, I wanted to mention that because she never mentioned me. God damn it, they didn't put film in the camera.
Didn't get any of it?
Oh, they got some, and I'll have to repeat it. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Get some more?
Well, I don't know what the hell they're going to do. They're incompetent. Well, I'm going to get a cup of coffee.
I made some earlier.
And I think I'll make a pot. You want some?
Yeah.
Okay. So where am I in this epic?